Damian Lillard has taken Dame time and his bars to the smallest market he could possibly take it to with the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo. TV, we will start with you. Excuse me. What should we expect from Dame time in Milwaukee?
We should expect probably the best duo in basketball in Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, I mean, the few games of preseason, we're not going to take too much into that because Damian Lillard has struggled. But when you think of the duo of Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo in terms of their two abilities on the basketball court, Giannis being one of the biggest forces in basketball, head to the rim, head down, and completely dominating the paint, mixed in with Damian Lillard's limitless range, his spacing, and ability to run the pick and roll with Giannis, it seems like a match made in heaven. So when we saw Giannis Antetokounmpo in request a trade, or not request a trade, but he requested that the Milwaukee Bucks do something, or else he might have a chance to leave Milwaukee. Damian Lillard was on the radar for the Milwaukee Bucks because not only was that they needed to make a move in order to keep themselves in playoff and championship contention, they needed to make sure they got that star next to Giannis to make sure that he was able to commit to the Bucks for the next couple of years. And Damian Lillard, although he is older than Jrue Holiday and all that, his game will age perfectly, and that duo, just that possibility of them two together, just makes up for anything that they've lost in the trade. They've lost some defense, they've lost some key depth pieces, but when you have a chance to get a possible top 5 point guard in Damian Lillard over there in Milwaukee, you're not going to get it any other way besides a trade. So they had to do it, and I'm glad they did it. Does that mean that Giannis has to do more defensively? Does that mean it's going to put a more, defensive burden on him? Yes. And their depth hurts and all that. But Damian Lillard is just too good of a basketball player to not try to go after, especially with a player like Giannis on your roster. I think that the Milwaukee Bucks had to make a sacrifice, and Jrue Holiday was that sacrifice, unfortunately. And Damian Lillard, I think, even though it's, again, struggled in the preseason so far, I think as the season goes on, you're going to see that this is going to be a deadly duo come playoff time, especially.
Jalen, what should we expect from Dame time in Milwaukee?
I think the main thing is that we have to understand before we actually go into the regular season that this isn't a regular season move. I think that's the most important thing that we have to understand with it. The Milwaukee Bucks have made it a habit of being a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. They're coming off of having the best record in the Eastern Conference just last season. And what did that amount to? Not much for us to really write off about, and something that made it worth Giannis Antetokounmpo saying what he had been saying up until the Dame trade in terms of reflecting on his time in Milwaukee and understanding that maybe long-term this might not be the best place for him in order to win further championships. Now, Milwaukee, of course, responded by saying, hold my beer, and put together the best trade package they could possibly make to acquire easily the best player to change teams this offseason. I would make a pretty decent argument for that. I think the main thing that we have to understand, too, is that I think TV said it beforehand, I think on paper, theoretically, they are the best duo in basketball because of their skill set. One guy has limitless range, the ability to play very well in the pick and roll, one of the better guys that can assist in the pick and roll without having an elite big man really up until this point. Now he has a big time role man in Giannis Antetokounmpo. He has another big man that he can kick out to Brook Lopez. There's a lot to work with. I think this also knocks Chris Middleton down the pecking order as an offensive threat, where maybe as an on-ball handler, he's now second as opposed to first. Now, in terms of overall scoring pecking order, Chris Middleton is third as opposed to second. Typically, these type of things really reflect well on their makeup. But I think the main thing is they are going to focus on trying to create the best 2-man game offensively in the league, because that is going to be what helps them in the postseason more than anything. And obviously, like TV mentioned beforehand, there's going to be more defensive onus on guys like Giannis Antetokounmpo, for example. But I think that they have the personnel around that to be able to maximize everything else that they have. They're going to be a good regular season team. I just think that they are focused on building for something way deeper than that. I think they're going to use the regular season as an experimental test ground. And I think basically the last time they did that in terms of experimenting with different defenses and things like that, they won a championship. Not to say that that's what's going to happen, but the last time that the Milwaukee Bucks use a regular season as a testing ground, as opposed to instead of a proving ground, it worked out more in their favor in terms of what reflected in the postseason.
I tend to agree with you, Jalen, on the idea that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to use this season as a testing ground. Drew Holiday is not the only Milwaukee Buck that is going to leave the Milwaukee Bucks this season. I do not anticipate Chris Middleton making it to the end of this season as a Milwaukee Buck. I think the reason for that is because Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo are going to do what they're going to do. Dame is going to be Dame. Giannis is going to be Giannis. It's going to be the deadliest pick and roll and the deadliest two-man game in the league, bar none. Understood. Here's the deal, though. Not only has Chris Middleton dealt with some injury, not only has Chris Middleton dropped down the pecking order, Chris Middleton, quite frankly, could be a very good use to a lot of other teams in the league who might be just one piece away, maybe, from taking that next step, whether it's from play-in to playoffs, playoffs to contender to champion, whatever that looks like. Here's the problem, though. If you're the Milwaukee Bucks, and Jalen, you mentioned it, where's the depth? Like, there is now not much bench left for them. And there's only one player on the team that you can trade justifiably and get some of that depth back. You're obviously not going to trade Giannis. You're not going to trade Brook Lopez. You're not going to trade Bobby Portis. The one person that holds any true weight where you can get one or two, maybe even three quality bench players to help fill up that bench is Chris Middleton. So if you're a Bucks fan and you think that Chris Middleton is going to be on the team come season end, I could be wrong. And they could keep it and just work out on the 6-man or on an 8-man rotation. I watched the Aces win a championship 3 days ago playing just 8 players. Granted, that was because 2 of the starters were hurt, but it still worked out for them. If that's what you want to do, Milwaukee, that's what you can do. But if you want to compete and have a good bench, if you want to compete and be able to go deep and really be able to give Giannis and Dame the rest that they might need throughout the course of the season, not saying they're load managing, but just not burning them out with 35 and 40 minutes a game in the regular season. If you want to make sure that you have a bench that's ready and solid role players, the one thing that you can do, the one thing that we've seen countless teams do in the past is trade away the third best player on the team. And Chris Middleton, not only were you the third best player on the team when Drew Holiday was there, you're the third best player on the team now. And if being completely honest, considering the fact that he's been hurt so much, he might actually be the fourth best player on the team because there is a guy named Brook Lopez who should have been Defensive Player of the Year last year. So Chris Middleton, pack your bags, you're leaving Milwaukee. And it's not a bad thing. Like this isn't a thing of like Chris Middleton's bad. This is Chris Middleton of all the players that we have. Chris Middleton is the one guy left on the Bucks that's expendable. You're not trading Giannis, of course, because the only reason why you have Dame is because Giannis is there. You're not going to trade Brook Lopez because he is, by all intents and purposes, the defensive anchor. You're not going to trade Robin Lopez because he is basically the dollar store version of Brook Lopez. And they work together when they're on the floor at the same time. And you're definitely not going to trade Big Bobby Portis. There's one guy on this team that you can trade and has trade value that you can get good things back and good pieces back in return for. And that one guy is Chris Middleton. So if you're asking me, what should we expect from Dame time in Milwaukee? It's the end of Chris Middleton in Milwaukee. I don't think he makes it to the end of this season as a Milwaukee Buck at all.
I don't know about that. And I think like, as much as the depth is an issue, there's certain teams where you have to like make that trade away from a 4th star or 3rd star to get the depth. I don't think the Milwaukee Bucks are that. They still got, like you mentioned, Brook Lopez. They still got Bobby Portis still on the roster. They have Pat Connaughton, who's been a staple of that team for a couple years now. But at the end of the day, what do the great teams do? They keep their core guys together. And for the most part, they did, barring Drew Holiday. But what else do? They freaking scout the buyout market. This is what some of these championship teams do in order to improve their top talent. They have to make some sacrifices. This is not like the Phoenix Suns where you have 4 guys and you have to replace everyone else on your roster. This is a team where they still have, 6 or 7 guys that they can keep there together. You might want to like think about hopefully, if there's someone to trade, maybe it's someone like Marjan Beauchamp for like a team who wants to give away a veteran in exchange for, a potential young player there. But at the same time, the Milwaukee Bucks, if anything that they don't want to do, they don't want to mess with that front 7. 8 through 15, that's where you want to mess around with. That's where you check out the buyout market. That's where you check out who's going to be, released before the season starts, all that good stuff. So as much as Chris Middleton probably is the most tradable asset on the team, I don't see any situation here where I believe that Chris Middleton actually does get traded.
Steve, let me ask you a question. Before Dame got there, who was the Bucks closer?
It It was Drew Holiday or Chris Middleton. Yeah.
Now that Drew Holiday is gone and Dame is there, who's going to be the Bucks closer?
It is gonna be Damian Lillard. But
so what is Chris Middleton doing for me?
He's been shown that he's a good off-ball player. He could be a spot-up shooter, and I think but
he's a good off-ball player as the second best player on the team. He's not the second best player on the team anymore.
Well, we have to see how it works first. We haven't seen him work on the floor together. I mean, Chris Middleton had to have so much load over the past couple of years to even just be the only on-ball creator for this team. Maybe
I agree.
I think having Damian Lillard is gonna maybe not elevate Chris Middleton, but I think that Chris Middleton, especially coming off that major injury he did a couple of years ago, maybe he's just not the same guy. Maybe
that's fine.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, I think for someone who knows the team very well, Chris Middleton, who's been there throughout the entire Giannis era. I don't think it's especially when you already have Damian Lillard, you want to see how this plays out. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the trade maybe Chris Middleton's role just becomes completely irrelevant to this team and it just doesn't work out. But at the same time, I think if he's even giving you close to the production he's giving you a couple of years ago, I don't see any reason to trade him. I still think he is a good third piece on this team.
How often have we seen Giannis have an off night?
He's always healthy. He's been staying healthy a lot.
And how often do we see Damian Lillard have an off night?
Yeah. I mean,
what I'm saying is Chris Middleton's going to play this season as a Buck. I'm not saying we're not going to see him as a Buck at all. What I am saying is come trade deadline time, I think the Bucks are going to take a really hard look in the mirror and just ask, do we need to have Chris Middleton on this team to win a championship? Does Chris Middleton being on the team help? I'm not going to say that it doesn't because I'm not saying Chris Middleton is a scrub. What I am saying though is if you want to, for lack of a better word, take the Denver Nuggets approach, right? Mm-hmm. The Denver Nuggets have two really good players in Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. And they have two other good players who are pretty much glorified role players. Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. are glorified role players. Aaron Gordon was nothing in Orlando. Why? Because he was never built to be a first option. Michael Porter Jr. struggled a lot in the beginning of his time in Denver. Why? Because he was never supposed to be the second option. Jamal Murray was always the second option. And when we saw Jamal Murray go down, we saw Michael Porter Jr. struggle a lot. When Jamal Murray came back, Michael Porter had the best season we've ever seen him have. And so when you have two really good players and two glorified role players, you don't need to have someone like that. The Bucks have two really good players. They've got Giannis and they've got Dame. And they also have two glorified role players in Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez. They don't need Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton is an expendable cherry on top that if you have it, that cherry makes the dessert really good if it's a good cherry, but the dessert's going to be good without the cherry. And the Bucks are going to be good without Chris Middleton. And what they can do with Chris Middleton is they can give Chris Middleton the opportunity and look at what this team looks like and see if this team can win a championship. But this team wants to win a championship. And this team, bar none, regardless of Drew Holiday being in Boston, this team is probably going to be the best team in the East this season, no matter what their record is. And so if they want to make sure that they can get back to the finals, if they want to make sure they can not even get back to the finals, they can get back to the Eastern Conference Finals because they haven't been back to the Eastern Conference Finals since they won the championship in 2020. If they want to make sure they can get back there, they are going to need to build a bench around Dame and build a bench around Giannis. Because if there's two things that the Bucks haven't had, it's a bench. And it's consistent bench play. We've seen a couple of good bench players come and go. We've seen a couple of instances where the bench has shown up. But all in all, when Giannis Antetokounmpo needs some help, if Damian Lillard needs some help other than them two, they're going to need a bench. They're going to need that third or fourth guy like the Nuggets have who just comes up out of nowhere and just gives you 20 because they feel like it. They're going to need a guy like a Max Strus or a Gabe Vincent who can just come out there and hit 4 threes from the corner and really get the crowd going and really get the team, swing the momentum in the other direction. That's what they need. And there's only one player on the team that can give them that, and it's Chris Middleton. But in order for them to get that, they have to let him go. We talked about salary dumping earlier. Chris Middleton is going to be a salary cap casualty for the Milwaukee Bucks because Damian Lillard is going to sign an extension. And now that Milwaukee has shown that they are committed to winning another championship, Giannis is going to sign another extension. And now that we have these 2 tax aprons now, where once you hit that second apron, you're done. The days of like, I get the buyout market, but like, unless they want to be signing vet men's willy-nilly, they better take Chris Middleton, and they better go find some guys who are still on some cheap contracts and bring them in to be on the bench and win a championship this season. Because that would be the missing piece for them winning a championship this season, is trading Chris Middleton. Not because he can't do anything for them, but because what they need, Chris Middleton can't provide. And Chris Middleton cannot provide the production of 2 to 3, maybe even 4 really good bench players. He just can't do that. He just can't.
I mean, I think both of you guys make really solid points across the board. I think the good thing for the Milwaukee Bucks is they don't have to make the decision right now. By them extending Chris Middleton, he's not even eligible to be traded until as early as December 15th. And we know they have until February when the trade deadline actually hits before things get really tight. So their first opportunity to even take a look at the idea of putting on the trade block isn't for a month and a half into the season, which gives them a lot of real estate to work with. Another thing that's really important to look at when you talk about his contract in particular as a trade chip, if we're going to focus heavily on what moving Chris Middleton can look like, he signed a 3-year deal, but the 3rd year is a player option, which is very favorable to any team that picks him up because they'll really only have him sign for this season and next season. That makes him very easy to either flip again or makes him a very interesting option as a guy that can end up coming off their books next year if he chooses to not pick his player option up. Now, the player option is like $32 million or something like that, so Buddy might take it because he's going to be like 32, 33 years old. He might take it, but he'll still be he'll be 32 years old or whatever the case may be. I'll double check just to make sure. He'll be 34. He's 32 right now. So he's going to be 34 years old, and it's going to be $33 million for the player option. I think he's more than likely going to pick that up. But even with that being the case, if he picks it up, he's going to be an expiring contract. It becomes an unrestricted free agent that following summer. He is a very interesting trade chip for anybody that needs wing play. Here's the interesting thing about that phrase. Name a team in the league that doesn't need wing play. Now you get in a place where you have a really nice trade chip on your hands. So that's where I think I agree heavily on the idea of Chris Middleton unfortunately being viewed as, I guess, the odd man out, right, in the sense of making this team better because, again, A, he has the most favorable contract to move. B, he has the most disposable skill set to move off of in terms of what you can replace within the roster you already have and what you can potentially replace with the players that are obtained for him. And the last thing is, let's keep it a beam. With as much that they gave up for Damian Lillard, Milwaukee is kind of in need for an influx of specifically young talent, but overall, like Marcus touched on beforehand, depth pieces in general. It wasn't just Dame that came in and it kind of just kept itself as it is. Grayson Allen played starter minutes for this team over the last 2 to 3 years. No longer on the team. Drew Holiday as a starter, no longer on the team. There's a handful of dudes who played real minutes, and now we're asking Pat Connaughton to play significantly more minutes on this roster. We're asking Bobby Portis to have an even more important defensive role than we're used to asking him as a guy who typically is a 6-man off the bench that's usually just used as a big man spark plug offensively, a la like a Naz Reid for Minnesota. I mean, there's already a lot of roster influx for them as it is, and now they need to be able to expand on that by at least adding some kind of depth because Marcus touched on it earlier. Every NBA champion sets the new meta, right? There's this idea we go from the big 3 era to shooting threes at a high frequency to let's get the best possible duo we can with surrounding talent that focuses on defensive versatility while our 2 offensive players have as much of a skill set as possible to carry us to the promised land on that side of the ball. The new meta is get you a duo that makes sense in terms of their comparative skill sets and get you a group of guys around that duo that understand what the heck their job and responsibility are, and they do exactly that on a night-to-night basis, and you have yourself a way to you have yourself a real championship formula. As of right now, that is the meta, and if we're following that, the need for Chris Middleton becomes questionable, and that's where I was sparked from. Now, of course, the Phoenix Suns have to be different. They're going to put a lot of this into perspective because they're a team that decided to go, I would say, like opposite of this, but they also tried to beat the second apron, which is what Marcus mentioned beforehand. This is getting ahead of the financial finagles that are going to take place next season, where a lot of people are going to be counting their pockets. So they went about it a very unconventional way. There's going to be a lot to like about this Milwaukee team, but I think they are going to be, like I said, the testing ground aspect of it. There is going to be a lot of try this, try that, see what works, see what doesn't throughout this season. Postseason time is probably going to be reflectionary of that too.